Hey, it's Chris, and we are back, and we're still talking about functions. In the last lesson, you built your first function end to end. You took a workflow, you saved it as a function, and you called it from a new table. Hell yeah, that's a big deal. But right now, that function really, it only helps you. And in this lesson, we're covering how to roll functions out across your entire team so everyone's running the same logic, nobody's rebuilding from scratch, and you can actually control what's happening in your workspace. So by the end of this lesson, you'll have a function library set up that your whole team can use. Now, let me start this off with a football analogy, which I kind of feel obligated to use, even though I know nothing about football, but I live in Philadelphia, so people keep walking by me and shouting, "Go Birds" at me. Think of your org using functions like a football playbook versus one player's notes on their own position. Your notes help you remember your job on a given play. The playbook belongs to the whole team. When you have the playbook, everyone lines up the same way and runs the same play. When the coach changes the playbook, the whole team runs the updated version at practice. And I want you thinking of functions as playbooks that helps the whole org, not just you. So as a reminder, when you save a function, it lives at the workspace level. That means every person on your team can call it from any table that they're working on. That goes for your account scoring model, your enrichment waterfall, your ICP qualification logic. All of that becomes shared infrastructure instead of living privately in someone else's table. Where this gets really practical is it enables teammates who might not be Clay power users. Most teams are going to have this problem. The best enrichment logic lives inside one person's head, and it's buried in the table that only they understand. So when that person is out of office, or maybe they move on to a different role, nobody knows how to replicate what they built. So everyone needs to rebuild from scratch, or they're pinging around asking for help in Slack. Functions flips all that. The ops person becomes the architect, sales reps, marketing coordinators, SDRs. They all become the callers who are bringing the function into their own Clay tables. They don't need to know how the waterfall works or which data providers are being queried. They add one column, they map their inputs, and get clean, structured data back. Yes, we all know Clay is amazing, but not everyone is going to want to become a power user, and that's totally okay. You're just asking them to add one column, and then the complexity is all hidden inside the function. This means that onboarding gets a lot faster too. Instead of walking a new teammate through building out this whole enrichment sequence from scratch, you just point them to the function library, they add the column, map their inputs, and all done. When it comes to functions, here's a question that comes up all the time. Credits. You might be thinking, cool, this is great, Chris, but what happens when someone accidentally runs an expensive enrichment on 1,000 rows and just burns through all our credits? It's a great question, and fortunately, functions can handle governance as well. There are actually two patterns that I recommend building from the start. First, conditional enrichment using a checkbox input. So for example, phone number lookups cost more credits than email lookups. What you can do is you can build a function where phone enrichment only runs when a checkbox is set to true. The person calling the function has to explicitly opt in order to run it. That means that they can't accidentally trigger it on 1,000 rows. This way, you've still applied best practices to that function, and also you've protected your team's credit budget without having to be that bad guy and police it manually. And number two, we call this compliance gating. If your team operates in regions with enrichment restrictions like GDPR, you're going to add a conditional logic step that's going to look at the context region before enrichment runs and stops the workflow if it hits restricted geography. And because that check lives inside of the function, it runs every time for every person who calls the function. Nobody can skip it. Both patterns you set once inside the function, and then it's going to apply everywhere it's called. Let's wrap up this lesson with a few practical things that are going to help you roll out functions more effectively as a team. Now, we talked about this a bit in the last lesson, but name your functions so that a stranger knows what they do. Include what the function takes in and what it's going to output. So, for example, account scoring, ICP fit plus segment tag. That's pretty useful. Something like enrichment v2 underscore final underscore final. Not quite as useful. The last thing you want is a function library that looks like a folder of unnamed, unwanted tables. We've all been there. We don't want to do it again. Number 2, document your inputs clearly. When you define the input fields inside a function, those labels are the only instructions someone has when they call your function 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later. So make them obvious. And finally, start with your top 3 to 5 workflows that your team rebuilds most often. These are where your team is duplicating the effort the most. So convert those first, get them working, and let the library grow from there. In the next lesson, we'll work on scaling functions to high volume workflows and then keeping them maintained as your use cases grow.